Hey Edmonton, my name is Scott MacMillan. I am with Remax Elite and the MacMillan team. I have been selling homes for 25 years. I want to take a minute and introduce you to one of my trusted advisors in our toolbox and one of the leading experts for foundations in Edmonton. Everybody meet Todd Ivanochko.
Hey, Edmonton. Thank you, Scott. My name is Todd Ivanochko. I'm the president of Shield Foundation Repair. I've been in the industry for 20 years. I have thought I've seen it all, and just when I thought I have, something else seems to crop up and catch me. But there's nothing that can't be resolved. It just depends at what cost.
What we're going to do is I'm going to give you a five-part segment where I'm going to ask Todd five questions that I'm going to look at identifying when to call in a home inspection, when to call in a foundation expert, and some of the indicators and or signs that we are going to make sure that we are doing our best due diligence to know what you're getting involved with. Here we go. Todd, number one, at what point from a inspection perspective should I look at bringing in a foundation expert?
Oh, that's a good one, Scott, because a home inspector is the first one that comes through and identifies things. Anytime that you guys have seen vertical cracks, a significant amount of water, um, even stucco that is spalling off or horizontally moving on a wall between the wood framing and the top of a concrete wall are very, very good times to be able to call in a foundation repair guy. The difference is a home inspector identifies kind of issues and notes that maybe you've had water, there's high moisture content, but they can't necessarily determine what the issue is and if it is directly related to the foundation. And that's where we would be.
Excellent, thank you. Number two, what would be some typical cracking that you would see in an Alberta concrete basement? Is there such a thing?
Actually, there is. And that's a good question. This is one of the biggest things that people have to be identified with. Pretty much all homes in Alberta and around surrounding areas will crack at some point in time in its lifetime. And it's just because of the type of soil that we typically build on. It's a very plastic clay. So, meaning the more moisture it gets, the more it expands. The less moisture it gets, the more it shrinks. So, a house shifts and moves throughout the seasons. And I can see a house move that I monitor over 3/4 of an inch from side to side throughout one season.
Is there a size of a crack or a scenario that we should now identify that would be alarming or when we call you over?
Here's the thing. There is one of the biggest things that I think if anybody can take anything away from this conversation today is when you see a crack on a foundation on an outside corner, 8 to 10 inches off an outside corner, those are not generally a typical vertical crack and can be deemed as I've heard some people call it settlement cracks, and I've heard some people say it's just typical. It is not typically an atypical crack on a foundation wall. That is generally a relief crack, and that is generally formed from lateral pressure being applied to the foundation wall. And so it'll break on the inside corner of a foundation. And if you know the thickness of a foundation is 8 inches thick, going down one side and going down the other side. So when we see it 8 to 10 inches off, that's an inside corner.
Now, a traditional crack, let's say from a window butt, for example, and coming off on a 45 is something I've seen a number of times. Is that something to be alarmed at if it has the appropriate weeping tile, et cetera? It looks like grade is handling itself.
It can be. Every crack kind of tells its little story, but the more typical cracks and where we're going to find it is on the openings and cutouts in a foundation wall. And sometimes they can even deem just from the shrinking from original construction, you can get these little hairline cracks because the concrete's not shrinking uniformly. So when you see it off corners of windows, sometimes beam pockets, maybe even drop landings that are on foundations. That was what I would consider a little more of a typical crack. Now, the way it's cracking, and if you're starting to see the gap get open, it can start identifying settlement movement. One of
That's
the
when we call
biggest
in an expert.
things, exactly, and that's where because we've seen enough of these things. And the one thing that I guess you need to understand from it is that there is a stucco or a parging on the concrete foundation. And this is where you'll see a lot of the cracking because it's generally just applied to the foundation wall. In order to determine that it's actually completely into the foundation wall, sometimes you can just dig down below the parging line and get to the concrete wall, and that's where you'll see it go through because that parging flakes off and breaks off quite easily, and sometimes just hitting it with lawnmowers and whatnot will you'll see cracks in it, which aren't typically maybe or not even in the foundation wall.
And from your experience as well, a professional opinion, from the ability to fix it from the inside or the outside, is there a better process?
Uh, there is. And honestly, there's two completely different repair processes there. When you're doing it from the inside, you're dealing with a symptom. Where the water is actually coming from and where everything's starting from is from the exterior face of that. So when we repair it from the outside, we're not only repairing the foundation wall, we're preserving the life of the foundation wall, and we're preventing water from being able to become a future problem on that foundation wall. When you're doing it from the inside, what you're doing is you're putting essentially, if you think of it like putting a band-aid on a wound, you're stopping it from bleeding. And you're just putting water in and you're stopping the water from migrating completely through the wall. Now, what we tend to find is that it doesn't always go through to the exterior wall like you hear is supposed to do this beautiful mushroom thing. And what we've been finding, because that has been a common technique by a lot of people over a lot of years, is that we're starting to find weeping tile completely filled with that urethane. And so it's creating other issues.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome. Now, for a typical person who's going to come in and call and look at getting your services, what does that entail? What do you charge to go out and do a site visit? And then what would a starting price point be? And again, I know this is how long is a piece of string, but for let's say a traditional vertical crack that is a little bit of seepage and or has some signs, what would be those processes from a layman like myself to give you a call and then investigate further?
Well, crack repair, when we're talking from the exterior, can be as low as $1,500. It could be high as $80,000 or more. It depends
Yeah,
what we come up against, right? And same thing from an interior repair. You're going to see those things go from $600 to as high as, $2,500, $3,000. Again, it becomes down to the thickness of the crack or the width of the crack.
okay.
Um, Anytime that you shouldn't have water coming into a house. That's the bottom line. And when you've got water coming in, it not only starts to deal with deterioration of your basement, so all your interior finishings, but it potentially can create health hazards just through mold growth.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then for myself as well, what do you, from a protocol, I have identified a crack, give your company a call. You guys can come out there and provide an estimate, and then we just identify if it is the scale of, and you can take everything from a crack to, let's say, a structural or a full foundation replacement. Can you not?
We do, yes, and that's what we do. We do the weeping tile, we do sump pumps, and we do window wells, window well drainage. We do waterproofing, basement wall removal replacements. We'll lift and level houses. If you want a new basement, we can actually lift the house up. If you want me to spin it around on your lot 360 degrees and have your front door facing the back alley, I can do that.
Wonderful. No, we got
But
it all. So
yeah,
effectively, you can take everything from start to finish and make sure that it's going to be structurally sound for the long term and not putting a band-aid on a wound that's going to continue to create a problem.
absolutely, absolutely. And when you're investing, you knowing that the house is the largest purchase of someone's life, that you should take the measures needed in order to maintain that structure over time. And so it'll be a value when you finally want to upgrade or move on.
Todd, I cannot thank you enough for your time. He really is a trusted advisor. He was at one of my properties yesterday. I do love the honesty and the ability to communicate and also explain. I operated at grade 4 level, and so he was able to explain it to somebody like myself in simple terms, and then we're able to make a decision. And that's the key is we want to make sure that we're in this for the long haul, and then everybody wins. Now, I know a lot of people are going to mock me with my hard hat, and it might look like I have dragged this through the mud. I might have got it from a secondhand store, but nonetheless, I also pretend to be a contractor fella. I surround myself with guys like Todd. Todd, now one other thing that I forgot to bring up would be weeping tile. And this is a scenario. Explain to a grade 4 level, what is weeping tile? What does it do? And what do you guys do?
So that's a great question, Scott, because a lot of people don't completely understand what weeping tile is for. Weeping tile doesn't stop the water from coming through foundation walls. What weeping tile is designed for is to collect the water that's collecting at the base of the foundation, and essentially it's just a cavity to water move freely around your house. Now, as we're collecting that water, we got to get rid of that water. In Edmonton and surrounding areas, weeping tile was introduced in the mid 50s. Okay. So you get a lot of people that go into the homes and go, I don't got weeping tile because I don't have a sump pump. Sump pumps weren't introduced until the 1990s.
Wow.
And yes, that's exactly it. So when you're buying a house in and around Edmonton, now some of the surrounding communities like St. Albert and that were a little later, but let's Edmonton and surrounding areas, it's typically 1955, 56 is when we start to see it consistently and when it was introduced. How that weeping tile, it collected the water, and how they got rid of it is they brought it back down and they brought it and connected it into the sanitary sewer line. Now, some builders throughout the time, like maybe 5, 10% of them would connect it maybe to a floor drain or connect it directly to a storm sewer. But one of the biggest things that I can tell you to tell people to inspect is to try and find, I call it a backflow preventer that's buried in the floor of the house. And make sure that this backflow preventer fruit moves freely because the water from the weeping tile comes in, lifts this little flap, off it goes to the sewer. But if the sewer backs up, the flap pushes shut so you don't fill your weeping tile full of sewage. And
What
this was
year did the backflow protector become part of building code? Or is that something that happened in 1950? And is it something that has carried all the way through?
it's evolved. It started in 19 around 55 and it went right up until 1989, 1990. So you've
Okay.
got that into all those homes up until then. And then the sump pumps replaced that. And
What
that's
is
when
a
this is
sump pump?
dated. A sump pump is essentially just a pit with a mechanical pump that's inside it. Now the Weepital gets connected into that pit. The water goes in there at a certain volume. The sump pump automatically kicks on with a float and disperses the water out and empty the pit. It's a simple system. Each one of these things are great, but they do require annual maintenance to some degree.
And so is that something where you would look at like a spring fall scenario? You would suggest getting yourself to come in and or sorry, the homeowner to come in, have a look at it and just ensure they're operational?
That's absolutely. You should inspect at least once a year. And if you're going to inspect it, probably because springtime is typically when we get the big snow melt and all the rains, you want to be ready for that. And so I would recommend people, from a sump pit perspective, making sure that you see sediment in the bottom, get rid of that because that'll affect the volume of water in your pit and make your sump work harder so you could burn it out quicker.
Okay.
And these pre-1990 ones is inspect that backflow preventer in your weeping tile and make sure that flap doesn't have sediment up against it and it's moving freely so the water can escape its way into the sanitary sewer system.
And part of your services, do you guys install sump pits as well? And do you also install and maintain the backflow protectors?
Backflow preventers, we now replace them with sump pumps, and generally we'll connect it to the weeping tile as well. So it just depends on the situation. Just because also if you everything's evolved, the sewer lines went from the old asphalt based the paper lines to cast iron, and everything deteriorates over time. So we don't like to play with those things too much because it can open up a big can of worms, and we generally replace it with a sump pump and bring it up to today's standards.
Wonderful. Todd, is there any other critical items that you can say? We're going to look at a foundation wall. We got to make sure that weeping tile is doing its job. It's going to go into a sump pit. Last question I have for you is it a scenario where now it's going to almost de-water that space? What does a person have to do from identifying from the outside, from a walk around homeowner's perspective to make sure that we're giving it its best chance for extended life and any other spots that you would suggest to observe and or what you guys could do to ensure that we are doing the right things?
Well, that's actually a great question here, Scott, because weeping tile, if everybody can just keep in mind, weeping tile is just a cavity for water to naturally collect in and move freely around the base of the house. If you're getting water through the foundation wall, weeping tile doesn't stop that from happening because it's lower than your foundation floor or your basement floor.
Okay.
And so what I recommend is, especially if you're knowing you're going into a house that's in the 1955 and newer, is try and find the backflow preventer. And there's different versions it's evolved throughout the ages up until 1989, 90.
Okay.
Find that, make sure it's moving freely. As far as sump pumps, making sure that sump pump, you see the connection coming into the sump pit, because I've been in homes where they said we've never collected water. Well, during the build stage, it was never ever connected to the weeping tile. So, and there's simple tests that people can do and whatnot. And if you need more information, I can certainly share it with you and put it, you can add it to your website. But there's a lot to look for, but those are some of the basics. Make sure it works. Make sure it's clean. Make sure you see the weeping tile connection, which is a 4-inch pipe that comes into the sump pit. And if you see actually water coming through it, making sure that that sump pit is free and clear of debris so you can extend the life of the pump, and make sure that the water that is getting pumped out is actually moving away from the foundation, not just depositing outside the wall, which can create all kinds of other issues for you.
Amazing. Yeah, no, and we will do our best. I'm going to put some photos and further information in the comments below. Should you have any questions, by all means, I will put Shield Foundation, Todd's contact info along. Scott MacMillan, MacMillan team, thank you so much for your time, Todd.
Thank you.